Welcome back to Peak Performance Radio, and today we have a follow-up podcast with Robert Taylor from Smarter Team Training, or I should say Coach Robert Taylor. He is a international, national speaker as well as coach. I encourage you guys to look at our first podcasts. This follow-up podcast, we're going to have a really, really good conversation about high-intensity training. And before we just dive into the questions, I just wanted to see how you're doing, Coach, and what are some things that you're doing now since we've spoken.
Hey, man, how you doing, man? Again, it's always an honor to be on the phone with you, Marcelo. I'm always excited to talk and talk shop a little bit and share a little bit of knowledge and hopefully learn from others as well. So I got a lot of things going on, from clinics and events to new things going up on social media, and podcasts that I'm doing. It's really cool to see the feedback and just again learning from other people. I got a lot of clients getting a lot of attention right now, which is a lot of fun for them, and getting a chance to see 10, 11-year-olds grow. And actually, one of my former athletes, John Lackey, who just was the winning pitcher in the World Series. So it's been a lot of fun the last since we've talked.
It amazes me. I think, what are you at, podcast 300 already?
Well, I think my show is up to like 180 episodes, 30-minute ballpark with people around the world, and I know we have over 320 already scheduled. And so I just got to confirm times and finish editing some of the episodes that haven't been published yet.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. It's great to hear. I've always, and for people so they're aware, I've worked with Rob for the last couple of years, and I've always walked into his training facilities, and he's been pretty much has always been 100% consistent. Really hasn't, very passionate, really involved with his athletes, and he was probably the first coach that I walked into that actually educated me really in detail about high-intensity training. And, I wanted to do this podcast really to talk about high-intensity training, and coming from the person who actually, from the tree of training within that community, because it came out of the strength and conditioning world, high-intensity training, and it has evolved into the professional bodybuilding world, to the fitness world. But I wanted to talk to someone who's close to it, who's practiced it, who pretty much lives it and knows it in very great detail. So, I guess let's jump into our questions here. What is high-intensity training?
Well, first of all, I'm sure that when people hear high-intensity training, sometimes they assume it's the high-intensity interval training, the HIIT. And let's quickly get off of that topic. That's a conditioning scenario. That the HIIT, or what a lot of coaches will call high-effort training, has really just become a conversation that leads to arguments, just similar to sometimes Olympic lifting. But the two extremes would be that Olympic, if we want to call it powerlifting, or the clean snatch and jerk, the momentum-based exercises, and then the other side is the non-momentum-based exercises and or modalities, or execution, repetition, execution, that type of thing. And so there's two big extremes there if you get a chance to go in and watch people, quote-unquote, train. And some people try to do a hybrid of each and try to mix it in and try to, fit it all into their program. And to be honest with you, anybody that comes in and gets a chance to see what we do, and you've seen me train people for up to 15 years probably now, since you've been coming into the gym with me at a college setting all the way to the private setting now, we don't do Olympic lifts. In our strength training segment, we do no exercises that encourage momentum, and a lot of times people are a little bit shocked by how disciplined the athletes are to execution of the repetition. And ultimately, a program is defined by how well they can complete each and every repetition. If someone was going to come in and ask me, what's the foundation of what we do, and I would say it would be how we execute a repetition from the strength and conditioning, or from the strength side of things. In conditioning, we can argue or add momentum. That's where we're trying to actually encourage speed and the concept of power development. We have a power development program, so it's not that we do everything slow, but from the strength side of things, from that quote-unquote high-effort approach, we're going to try to train the muscle to concentric momentary muscular fatigue or muscular failure, depending on how people look at that. And we track that over time. So every 48 to 72 hours, the athletes or clients come in and they train hard. The workouts are generally 25 minutes to 35 minutes long. The stereotypical, you're not going hard enough unless you puke kind of mentality is not true. I have a lot of CEOs that are 55, 60 years old, and they come in and they lift unbelievably intensely relative to their own body strength and fitness level. I think the other component that people kind of get a little misconstrued is, well, then you have to lift light weights to do reps, do proper reps. Well, just the other day I did 22 reps on a Rogers Squat Pro for 505 pounds. I don't think that number is a bad number. You can see Dr. Ken Leisner do 405 on a barbell squat on YouTube for something like 24 or 25 reps. And there's guys, I'm sure, that are stronger than both him and I. I mean, there's guys that are unbelievably strong doing high-intensity modalities. They're staying safe and healthy, and they're being consistent with their training. So just speaking generally, I think high intensity is more of a no momentum-based exercise protocol that's relative to strength training, and there's a whole bunch of offshoots from there that I'm always willing to communicate and discuss from there. But I've been very lucky to learn from some of the outstanding, like you insinuated there, the trunk of the tree, and it's been a lot of fun. And if you get a chance to go out and meet some of these guys, they're very willing to share, and you just might have to go through a workout to prove that you're interested in learning and not just doing.
That's always the caveat, right? You can't just you just can't do one without the other, right? You can't. I don't teach anything that I can't do, have not experienced, and I think that should be kind of a mandatory thing. Unfortunately, sometimes people are great researchers and great experts of a movement sometimes without properly or have ever tried to compete as their whatever level of athlete that they are. And I know you brought that up before, talking about your average general pop compared to your athletes. How do you establish your training loads when you go into the weight room for high intensity training?
There's a couple different ways, and as far as establishing loads, a lot of people assume when someone does that they're doing some type of 1RM and then basing a percentage off of that and then developing a system that's based off of percentages. High intensity, generally speaking, or the way I do it, the high intensity, high effort type scenario, the way we do it, we don't actually do 1RMs, because my question is, if you're doing a 1RM, let's say, and not to pick on anybody, but if you're doing it on the clean and the squat and the bench press, are you doing a 1RM on the neck flexion or anterior tibialis, internal external rotation of the shoulder? More than likely not. So my question there is, then why is there a magic formula that makes those specific lifts necessary to test in a high effort, potentially high injury scenario, and you don't do the muscles that, generally speaking, if you look at an injury report, are the ones that sideline kids, rotator cuffs, anterior shins with shin splints, some type of hip or groin exercise. You don't ever hear someone 1RMing those things. So generally speaking, we'll ask the athlete to pick a weight or a resistance that they feel comfortable with using and performing in a proper repetition, no momentum, so they can control it. Our coaching cues are you got to lift it, you got to hold it, and you got to lower it. If you can't do those three things, then rep doesn't count. So if the protocol is to get 8 or more, and it takes you 10 or 11 to get 8 perfect reps, then that's what it's up. As you become a little more disciplined, I'm sure you're going to go 8 for 8 or try to get 9 and be much more disciplined in your approach. The concept that I've spoken about a bunch of times, it's called the swag theory, and obviously trying to keep everything clean, everyone can figure out the A, but it's a scientific, wild, and you can figure it out guess. And that sounds a little bit of a way to make people laugh, but we actually just put weight on there, to be honest. And we start light. I'd rather work with understanding the idea of a repetition, and each and every time you come in, the expectation is to get 1 rep better on every single exercise. As you progressively get fitter and you progressively get stronger, and you understand the concept and the expectation of what a repetition should look like, or ultimately what a set should look like, then the weight or the resistance will naturally go up. The resistance will naturally go up. Generally speaking, we start individuals with that 8 to 12 rep range for upper body, and as they get stronger and more fit, they'll be in that 6 to 12 ballpark, depending on their goals and what they feel comfortable with. And that could be from we don't know what their muscle biopsy is. They might tend to do a little bit better with a little higher rep range. They might tend to do better with a little lower rep range. Whatever works for that individual to show progress. Lower body-wise, we're generally going to be to start the individual with 15 to 20 reps, and then we'll progress them anywhere from 12 to 30, again, depending on what works for them. So there's a lot of things there that we do as far as the load goes. But generally speaking, we'll just ask someone to pick it up and see how many good reps they can do. How many proper repetitions can you execute in a repetitive format to, hopefully, to the point that you get to concentric muscular failure. We track that. That is one big thing that we do. We track seat heights, we track weight used, and we track the proper number of repetitions that are accomplished. Now, I'll give you a heads up, and you've actually been in the weight room with us. When concentric muscular failure is achieved and the athlete is fit enough to do it, there's overload protocols that we do beyond that, and a lot of times people call that your second set. But we try to do it in a situation where we can be predictable with it, and we actually will track overload scenarios too, which is something completely unique, and you don't see that happen too often in different type of environments.
No, you don't. You spoke about rep ranges there. Do you kind of follow a traditional rep scheme?
Traditional rep scheme is being, I've had conversations with people like, hey, we do 8 today and tomorrow we'll do 10. To me, especially working with a team, and then working with individuals is obviously a little different, but let's say in a team scenario, if you give somebody a 1RM, and then you take the percentage of that, and then you say, today you're going to do 8. I don't know how many that's perfect for, I don't know how many that's too heavy for, and I don't know how many people or how many that's too light for. On the team. And if I'm trying to get as much as I can out of each athlete every time I can see them, I think you need to give them a rep range. And so the way we set it up is either the first or last set of an effort, and we normally do protocols that are either 1, 2-set, or 3-set protocols, and we'll either track the first or last set, or we'll track the combined set. So let's say if it was, theoretically the 3 sets of 10, old school protocol, we'd give you 3 attempts to get to 30 reps. And let's say you had 2 minutes of rest that you can use any way you want. So the first set, you might get 12 reps, you take a minute and a half rest. So you know you only have 30 seconds of rest and you get 1 rest left. And so you might go 8 or go 6 and 2, and that might get you 20. Well, the next time you come in, you're trying to get to 21 or 22 in the same protocol, let's call it that. Other ways we do it is if we track the first set, and then you might need to get, let's say if the protocol is to get to 15, and you get 12 on the first one, your mandatory 1-minute break, and then your next job you might get 2, and then whatever break you want, and then you need to get 1. And we'll do different sets of breaks, but we'll only track your first effort. The other way we do it, we say there's a standard number in the beginning. So let's say it's a 2-set protocol. You have to get 8 on the first one, your mandatory 90-second break, and then you get as many reps as you can on the second one. If you get 4 or more, then we'll actually move your resistance up or your weight up, if you want to call it that. Or we might do it the other way. You might have to do 4 in the first one and then 8 plus on the second. Again, just playing with the numbers game and trying to add different what's called creative solutions to find to beat common problems, depending on the person's personality and their goals again, and what they feel they can do to give as much effort as possible.
You always hear that the concept of block periodization, and you talk about where people are programming today. What are your thoughts about HIIT today versus some of the other different types of modalities?
As far as it relates to periodization?
Yeah.
Yeah. My conversation with periodization is, and I do find it funny when you read a little bit about German backgrounds and people try to simulate or try to get that concept. But a lot of times the Olympic lifting community is gearing up for potentially one competition in 4, 5, 6 months down the road. They have one, peaking phase kind of scenario. Let's say basketball, you play 2 or 3 times a week. Lacrosse, you play 2 times a week. Football, you play 1 day a week. At what point do you go in to tell the coach, hey, coach, we weren't really ready. Next week we're going to peak. So I really found that kind of hard to deal with as far as a coach going in there and having a conversation with a head coach and trying to justify that our players aren't peaking yet for every game. So what we did is basically, as far as the periodization concept goes, as we approach the in-season component, we will actually maintain the intensity, if not go up, the volume will come down. We will probably do one, maybe maximum of 2 sets, depending on the playing time of the individual, and we might even cut back on the number of exercises. Generally speaking, an in-season program would have 2 chest exercises, 2 push, 2 pull exercises for, let's say, the back. We'll have 2 necessarily overhead presses, and that might be pushing up and then pulling down. And then we'll normally pick 4 lower body exercises. And then we'll have a weak link program that addresses any type of injury areas like the shoulders, the elbows, the hips, the ankles, the knees, depending on the individual's health, the history of injuries as they've gone through their seasons past, or if we have them coming in and they know there's some type of pre-existing kind of injury. But generally speaking, you're looking at 10 sets of exercise for a full body workout. You throw into that a little bit of the head, neck, grip exercises, which we do every day we come in, and you're looking at 35 minutes of pretty intense work and get them out the door. And that's just from the strength segment. In the off season, where they're doing very little, it's called individual work or very little skill work, we generally pick about 16 sets. So we're adding generally 1 set per upper body, and then we normally add about 3 or 4 for the lower body, depending what goes on, what's going on there as far as health history goes. So generally speaking, as far as the periodization goes, the volume might be a little more, but the intensity never changes compared to the off-season to the in-season. The expectation is still, let's get 1 rep better.
So, you're always trying to get better. And, at the end of the day, how do you measure your outcomes, really? Is it, I guess, in all honesty, most coaches are weighed by wins and losses. What are some metrics that you use in the weight room that kind of give you an identification of are they getting fit, are they not getting fit, are they getting stronger? I know it's kind of an easy answer if they're lifting more weights, if they're doing more reps, if they're recovering faster, but are there any specific metrics that you've been using in your programs that you find are important to track and share?
Yeah, I'm a little outside the box on this one, and my approach when I coach athletes or clients now, a lot of people approach it saying that the workout has a positive impact on, let's say, the 42 or 70, 47 or 71 hours between workouts. I look at it the other way. If you're doing things right between the workouts, your workouts will naturally go up. So I really try to use that as a way to find out if they're doing things correctly between, let's call it strength training workouts or conditioning workouts. And we'll monitor that by how they're doing as far as reaching their new 1 rep max, if you want to call it that new plus 1 rep. And I don't mean from a 1 RM, I mean from I did 8 this time, I did 9 next time scenario. Let's say if you have 10 exercises, we track on a daily basis how many pluses you got. So how many, let's say if you went, you got better on 8 out of 10 exercises, you'd be 80% better that day. And over time, I can actually hand that to a coach and say, hey, every day that this person comes in, their average increase or average day they got better, they're getting better on 95% of everything they've done compared to the last time they come in, which I think is great, as opposed to testing them once, maybe twice a semester in a college setting or in a private sector, maybe every 4 months, depending on what their schedules are, and you're actually showing minimal to little strength gains over time. The gain that you're getting over time is minimal compared to the effort that you should be giving on a daily basis. We could turn down the motivation in the room and just have a very subdued environment and then do nothing with them, and then 16 weeks later have them come back in and crank them up motivation-wise, get the music thumping and pumping and get some buddies around the bench press there, and I'm guaranteeing you that they can bench more. That doesn't mean it's gotten any stronger. That just means the motivation for the execution of that lift has gone up. I'd like to see somebody actually compete on a daily basis and grind over time. And they got to really fight on a daily basis or that every other day or every third day that they come in and see me, again, depending on their goal and depending on their athletic schedule, academic schedule, that type of thing. I'd like to see them the test be evaluated every single time they come in. So let's just say if you did a Rogers 3-way row and today you did 12 good reps at 150. And then the next time you come in, and we might not rotate around to that workout again for another week and a half possibly, and you get back on there, you're trying to do more weight or more reps. And then I'm going to be able to report to the coach that you did 10% better, or you did 5% better, depending on if you're 1 for 10 out of those exercises that you selected. So generally speaking, I look at evaluation a little differently, and I try to hand it in on a daily basis so we can give a coach a report on who's doing what. Now, it's not to say that you score 40% on improvement, and that's a bad day. You might have a really tough, hard workout, and it was preceded by coaches running you like crazy at practice. So you might come in and be exhausted. You might have other things going on in life. If those numbers are really low, it's also a red flag for me to bring the athlete in to double check and make sure everything's going on. Because if those 48 hours between workouts are not going the right direction, the workout by itself will never be successful. So we need to really start to relate to the people that we work with and just engage them as a person and not just a number on a record board.
So, that being said, when you're looking at that, you have a metric, you have a measuring system. Let's peel back another layer here. How do you establish your exercise order? And let's say you have a 3-time-a-week type of schedule with a. Do you require more than that? I mean, let's apply this to general pop as opposed to sport teams. I know most traditional sport training programs, off season it's 4 times a week, and in season it might be twice. Again, it's been based on my experience. There's the caveat before someone comes out and starts commenting on this podcast saying, so general population, 3 times a week. What's your exercise order look like, and what does your rep scheme type of look like?
I'll even tell you that anybody who signs a contract with me to work and train with me, and I don't care if it's a youth individual or a CEO type personality, if you want to call it that, they have to come in a minimum of 2 times a week. And we see tremendous gains in a minimum of 2 times a week. Generally, the way the workouts are set up is the first 5 minutes are based on a warm-up, and we do a progressive warm-up, and as they progress, it'll actually get to 10 minutes. And we use treadmills, we use movement modalities, we'll use, if you want to call it dynamic warm-up, we'll use aerodyne bikes, rowing machines, anything that kind of is a rhythmic in nature, and we can be progressive with it. It's not just get on there and go, do 2 laps and then touch your toes. I'm really against that. We'll actually track warm-ups and that type of thing also with heart rates to find out how we're actually getting them up. It's been in my experience that it takes about 4 minutes to get the athlete or the client to go from basically a base level, if you want to call it that, up to a point where it's actually a competitive above 80% of their max heart rate type area consistently. So we give them about 4 minutes to say that that's their anticipatory type range, if you want to call it that. That's not science, that's just giving me a term so we can have a conversation. From 4 minutes to roughly 10 minutes is what we'll call that warm-up. So they can do anything they want in that first 4 minutes to kind of get going. I prefer to see them do some type of, if you want to call it that high-intensity interval training, that conditioning concept. I want to see them sprint a little bit in whatever it is, whether it's a treadmill, a bike, or a rowing machine, or even an agility cone kind of drill, and then have some type of slower response, not a resting, like standing still scenario, but I want to see them push and then relax, push and then back, relax, especially if they're if they compete in an intermittent sport. I want to start trying to teach that heart rate to have to go up and down and see that there's actually a distinct up and a distinct down. Fitness, in my opinion, isn't defined by how high your heart rate goes, but in return, when you stop activity, how quickly it comes back down. And I think you actually have to train the body to be able to take those types of stresses, those high-intense, hard-run type scenarios, and then be able to adapt and recover from them fairly quickly. After the warm-up, we'll generally start with some type of conditioning scenario or go into the agility footwork stuff. So I don't care if it's cone drills, reaction drills, some type of quote-unquote sport-specific type scenario if they're doing individuals or doing some type of skill, sports skill replication type scenario. I'm not a big guy that tries to, what do you want to call it? I don't like the mimic exercises, but we'll teach them how to cut off the inside foot, how the good jumping and landing mechanics, running mechanics, those types of things, generally speaking, especially with the young kids. The youth, I don't think, have gotten enough of that education as they've been brought up through the coaching ranks. So we see a lot of success and a lot of positive feedback from just going through that a little bit of slower progression. After that, that's about, they'll say that's 30 minutes. So warm up into the conditioning agility with 30 minutes ballpark. We'll normally do some type of weak link program. That includes abs, low back, anything for your hip, anything for your ankle, anything for your wrist, anything for your elbow, and anything for your shoulder. As soon as that's done, that might be 10 minutes. As soon as that's done, we start with the head, neck, and upper back. and I make that the beginning part of any strength workout, whether you're, again, a CEO, whether you're an administrative assistant, or you're a 12-year-old young girl playing basketball. We do something for the head, neck, and upper back in every single strength training workout that we do. From there, we start with generally lower body, then we'll do upper body, and then we'll do some type of performance stretching. I prefer to do personal, like partner-type stretching, whether we can pair people up and actually push PNF-wise. There's other people that sometimes like to do foam rollers. Some people like to use tennis balls. Trigger Point Therapy, I think, does a great job. We have a bunch of their products, and we use a whole bunch of their educational tools, to be very honest with you, during that segment. And then we give them the boot and tell them to make sure they eat, sleep, and hydrate. If you don't do those three things, the next time you come in, I'm going to know, because you're not going to get a +1 every single rep that you come in.
So, you mentioned some technology, and I know in our past podcast we talked about heart rate training. One other technology that I'm seeing in the weight room more and more is accelerometry, tracking bar speed, tracking average power lifted throughout the whole workload, tracking power for the workload, tracking the reps, tracking the weights lifted. It's starting to really, it started with Tendo units, I know, in the industry, and now you're seeing other different types of devices, other types of remote solutions. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on Tendo units and understanding bar speed, if you want to call it that, I think is pretty clear, and I don't think it's actually changed over the years, in my opinion. If I have a conversation with someone who does Olympic lifting, and one of their things is you got to move the bar fast, well, obviously my next question is going to be, well, how do you measure bar speed? Well, if you don't have a Tendo unit or some type of accelerometry type scenario on every single bar, on every single rep, then I don't understand how you can monitor bar speed. And don't tell me that, I can see it by my eye. My eye can tell me how fast it's going. I just don't know if I believe that, to be very honest with you. It seems like a really vague source of statistical analysis if you're just using your eye. Plus, you're not watching every single lift. If you got 4 platforms in there, you're not watching every single rep of all 4 of those platforms going on at the same time. So it's very difficult to provide feedback as far as speed of the bar if you're not tracking the speed of the bar. If you do have some type of bar tracking technology, and we'll use the Tendo units, not to just keep giving them a little bit of a plug, but let's use a Tendo unit per se. What's your minimum threshold for bar speed? So let's say if you're going to do your quote-unquote 1 RM of your bar speed, at some point, if your protocol says we're going to do 8 today, and they get to a minimum threshold and they're below that, shouldn't that person stop lifting then? Because your bar speed is then dictating your strength outcome or your strength output or your power output. Some people just keep tracking the number, and they just keep looking at the number and never actually use it for anything. If you're going to track something, then it has to be used for something, or you're just wasting your time. And I track a lot of heart rate stuff, and we look at it on a daily basis, and it actually makes an impact in how we prepare our next training session, our next practice, extra conditioning, no conditioning, and enhance the overall experience of the athlete. If someone's in a weight room and they're actually using a Tendo unit and they're going above and beyond that conversation of just, I use my eyeballs, it's an eyeball test, and that's how I know how fast it's going, I compliment them. I really think it's a great job. If that's your belief and you really find that that's useful, I think that's awesome. I understand that there's a substantial financial investment when you do that. So you have to make it worth your while, and it has to benefit your program. Do me a favor, though. What is your minimum threshold for that bar speed as far as it's slowing down based on fatigue, whether it's neurological or strength? And then what point do you cut them off? And then how do you track that? How does your program adapt and adjust with that data? I've never really gotten a true answer from several people that have done it, and I think it's still a little bit of a work in progress, and they got to figure out how it works in their program. It's something that we do with jump and landing scenarios. We have a couple different software tools that we use. We're using a Vertimax and then an accelerometry tool, like a Zephyr equipment and that type of thing. And if someone goes below, again, we just use that 80% of that threshold, their peak hour output velocity-wise or acceleration-wise. If that number comes below 80, they're done. They're fatigued, whatever way. They could be just overly exhausted. They might just be emotionally not connected, or they might be neurologically just fried. So we pull them up, and they're done. So they go to the next exercise, and we move on from there. But if you're going to use technology in your program, I really do think you need to have a way to assess self-assess. You need to be able to provide feedback, and then you have to adapt your program to what you're getting from the feedback you're getting from tracking yourself.
Yeah, you're looking at it from a power standpoint and looking at average power and max power within the session as opposed to speed, because speed is it's relative, and there's a lot there that still needs to be proven through research. And number one, it has to start in a weight room. It can't start in a sterile environment. That's the dilemma with research all the time, right? Bridging that gap. So then, to really wrap this all up, what are some books or some recommendations that you would make to a person that wants to understand HIIT more? Is there a certifying body? Is there a book that you would recommend? Is there any coaches that you would like to identify to say these are good coaches that represent the tree besides yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go back, the guys that are still here that do an unbelievable job, and they just don't have their name out in the limelight kind of thing. But a guy like a Dan Riley, who's with the Redskins and won 4 Super Bowls without doing an Olympic lift. He's primarily a high-intensity guy, a high-effort type guy. Mike Gittleson at Michigan, University of Michigan, not a bad football program. I think they might have won more games in the 30 years that Mike was there at Michigan as the head strength conditioning coach than any other college program in the country. And they were primarily a high-intensity based program. Tom Brady came out of that program, Charles Woodson came out of that program. I mean, people can, Heisman Trophy winners and Super Bowl MVPs came out of that program. A guy that's a little bit not straight up strength and conditioning guy, not a strength coach guy, but he's a chiropractor who's a strength coach, is Dr. Ken Leisner. He does an awesome job with the, I'm actually drawing a blank on his Iron Game collection Iron Talk collection of books. So he actually produced that, and I just got an email the other day about that one. It's a white book with a black cover looking thing on it, and that's an unbelievable book. Look up Dr. Ken Leisner, and then just look up book, I'm sure. Matt Brisky does the practical approach to strength and conditioning. That's another outstanding book, and it's research-based, and you can ask questions and reach out to Matt. He speaks at a bunch of my events. I think he does an unbelievable job. I think it's on don't get me wrong here, but it might be the 3rd or 4th edition, I think, that he's actually revisited, and it came out this year. John Philbin from the National Strength Professionals Association put out a book on high intensity. If you want to learn more about high intensity, that would probably be a good starting point as far as the certification goes, to just learn more about that or this area, if you want to call it that, this area of the field. There's so many good guys out there that are doing quote-unquote high intensity, and then there's other coaches that they work for that need to see, hey, we got to do cleans, or we got to do whatever. So if you walk into an environment where a guy says he's more of a high-intensity or high-effort type guy, understand he's doing a job, and he might have to do some exercises in and around that to maintain his job. And I think that's one part of the college setting that's a little bit frustrating at the moment. They hire professionals, and they're not letting the professionals do what they do, and they get a little bit the coaches get a little involved. I mean, strength coaches can't impact what play they're running on offense, and so we got to let professionals be professionals in the weight room too. On the flip side of that, though, the strength conditioning professionals that are in the weight room working with the athletes, I think, have to do an unbelievable job of becoming educated and more knowledgeable in the field that we're in, so that we can promote a safe, productive, progressive, and practical, time-efficient type workout, so that the athletes can do that. We can't have 75 sets of exercises going on and think you're going to get that done in a timely manner. It's just not going to work. So start reading research and finding out better ways to get things done. I'd like to see how much we can do in as very little as possible to get the biggest bang for our buck. And I really try to stress that to everybody that comes through our program. It might be very short as far as what people just associate with strength training, but the goal and the idea is that you get as much out of that time that you commit to that. You're actually spending time, you're investing time in yourself. So let's use it really wisely.
You know what? I realize we've been having this whole conversation and we haven't talked about sets. One more question. Set schemes. HIIT, traditionally, there's a model of one set to failure. Is that kind of just one modality, or is that just kind of a a misidentified method of HIIT?
Yeah, generally the stigma that's associated with the high-intensity training is it's going to be machine-based, one set to failure. It's unbelievably uncomfortable, again, and there you might have a situation where you have a discussion with a trash can kind of thing. And that's the stereotype that is not necessarily true. We'll do multiple set stuff. We'll use barbells. We'll use dumbbells. We'll use man resistance. We'll use odd object stuff. If it's anything that we can be progressive with it in a safe, practical, and time-efficient manner, I have no problem using it as far as the modality goes. As far as sets go, and that we've already discussed a little bit that rep scheme scenario, but as far as sets go, I prefer to use 1 to 2 sets max, and we'll do 2 rounds of something or 1 round of something, and the effort level will be very hard, or very high, I should say, and we'll track every single set that the individual goes through. We may do some sets that are get up to 3. I don't think I've done a 4-set protocol in forever, for a really long time. At some point, I don't know how many sets you start turning strength training into work. If you want to get stronger, you can go spend time volunteering with a farmer and carry 975 bales of hay and throw them in the back of the truck over a 10-hour period. I'm sure that your grip will get stronger. I'm sure that your back will be sore. I'm sure your legs will get conditioned. Is that specific to the athletes I work with? I don't know. If a farmer came into me and wanted to strength train, we would do the same thing. We would do something similar to that approach. We would do a short, high-effort type scenario, and we would predictably ask 1 more rep every single day, whether he wanted to do a 1 or 2 or 3-set protocol. That would be 100% his choice. Whatever we do for the front, we will do for the back. Whatever we do for upper body, we try to do lower body. We try to be very balanced in that approach. Our flexibility program, generally speaking, because that's part of what we do, anything you see in the mirror, we stretch, and anything in the backside, we make sure that we emphasize twice as much strength training. So theoretically, if we did 2 sets of quote-unquote bench, we would try to find 3 sets of something for back. Anything that we did quad-related, we would try to find something that we would do 3 sets on the hamstring, or let's call it that posterior chain side of things. So we do try to find a way to balance sets and volume and reps and everything like that out a little bit, and we'll actually side on the weaker side of the body when it relates to the overall encompassing execution of the workout.
Well, first of all, I just want to really thank you. This has been fun for me to share this information to our community, because the one thing that is, I think, in dire, because you're starting to see HIIT all of a sudden hit the scene again. It's having a renaissance. And I think people assume that HIIT is, like you said, high-intensity interval training. People think that HIIT is CrossFit. People think that HIIT is, and HIIT's a training modality that people have to understand that there's many different versions of it, and there's many different applications of it, but HIIT is not. I just want people to be cautious and understand what it truly is, and hearing it from a coach of practice is I think, the best way to start communication or start educating people out there. So thanks a lot, Rob, for spending some time this morning with me and sharing some information with our group.
Not a problem, man. Again, it's always an honor to talk shop, and again, if anybody has any questions, they can feel free to reach out to me. I'm very accessible on email, coachtaylor@smarterteamtraining.com, and if there's anything that I can do to connect people in their area to learn more about anything, whether it's high intensity, whether it's boot camps, whether it's Olympic-style lifting, knowledge is power, and we got to find a way to learn more on a daily basis. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse.
Yeah, I hope everyone takes heed to that. Thanks again.